We look at this book. History is old, but it rhymes and echoes, and we hear all that. You've been so interested in these stories and brought them back to light, I think, for a different audience. And here we are post-election. What about this do you think resonates today?
The thing that carries forward directly, not even as an echo, but is just a direct link, is the fact that the president's immunity from prosecution goes to an OLC memo at the Justice Department. The origins of that OLC memo at the Justice Department are the Agnew scandal. And so learning that history, which is actually something that we mostly learned after Mike and I finished the podcast. It's part of the reason we wanted to write the book, because we did new reporting about the origin of that policy at the Justice Department, which Trump, as you know, has benefited from so greatly. So that, to me, feels important, that we should understand where that policy came from, because it's not where you'd think. It's not like a founding fathers kind of thing. It's a crooked Spiro Agnew origin. But, you know, you were totally right in the way you set this up, Ari. Like, we haven't seen somebody leave office since Nixon who potentially was looking down the barrel of serious prosecution for multiple felonies. And Trump CNN is reporting today that one of the people Trump's considering pardoning is not only himself, but Alan Weisselberg, who is the top financial guy at the Trump Organization. I mean, if the president pardons him, pardons the top financial guy at his own business on his way out of office, this is, it is worth contending anew with the threat to the republic of having a felon in the White House.
Exactly. And what you point out here in this work and what people study for long periods of time is the problem in a system of, well, who watch the watchers? Okay, the CIA is good at surveilling. Who watches them? Okay, who will have accountability for the chief executive who's supposed to create the accountability? They're tough questions. And when faced with accusations, we get a similar response. We have very briefly here just Trump and Agnew comparison here. Take a look.
I want to say at this point, clearly and unequivocally, I am innocent of the charges against me.
It was a complete and total exoneration.
Pardons hang over Nixon, right? Pardons hang over Nixon, as everyone knows from the way he went out, and with what Trump is doing. How important is it, do you think, that we have a knowledgeable enough civic culture to say, well, the pardon is a commutation of and a reference to your guilt?
Yes, exactly. And that we have some, I think, renewed and more nuanced discussion about whether or not the pardon power can be used corruptly. I mean, if the pardon power is used to prevent the discovery of another crime or to prevent the implication of the executive himself or herself, I know the pardon power is black letter law of the Constitution, but if it is used for corrupt purposes, is it potentially something that could be pushed back on by the judiciary? And you saw that actually with Judge Emmett Sullivan in the Flynn case, raised that in open court when he had to announce formally that he would the Flynn case would end because of the pardon that had been issued by President Trump for Flynn. But he said at that moment that if the pardon power is misused, judges may query it, judges may push back on it, and I think Trump is up against that. And I mean, what we learned with Agnew is that the system isn't pushed to the breaking point by virtue of the fact that there are people in power committing crimes. The system is pushed to the breaking point when the people who are supposed to police that are themselves cowed or corrupted. And as long as you've got people with a backbone and people with civic duty guiding them in law enforcement, then the Constitution works to police bad behavior. Bad men aren't the problem. Bad officials who are supposed to hold bad men in power, that's the problem.
Well, that's such an important point you raise, which is straightforward but not often fully examined, which is if doctors are doing crime, that might be worse than a random person, given the personal authority they have, right, over patients, right? Mm-hmm. Policing is another example we've debated a lot. there's no expectation that these politicians will have a lower crime rate than others. And depending on how unchecked their powers, they may have a higher one. The question is not how do we get, as you say, angels to do zero crime, but does the system work? And it brings me to reading from your book. You write about the pushback. Agnew was signaling he was willing to employ a scorched earth survival strategy. The allegations against him were fabrications. The witnesses were crazy. The prosecutors were zealous and out to get him. It was there it is, everyone, quote, witch hunt. If it's good enough to work, it's good enough to plagiarize. Why come up with your own slogans? Why is it that those public rhetoric attacks at least work in the short term? Above my pay grade to say where we are in 10 years, but that some of them work then at first, work now, if not forever.
Because it takes incredible bravery not to fall prey to that sort of thing. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast on Agnew and I wanted to write this book about it is because I feel like the good guys in this story need their song sung a little bit. Like we tell each other tales of heroism and patriotism to try to help ourselves plan for and wish for and build ourselves into the kind of people who would follow those examples. And in the case of George Bell, the U.S. attorney in Maryland, he's just got line prosecutors who are pursuing penny ante local corruption. They stumble upon what the sitting vice president is doing, taking envelopes stuffed full of cash in his vice presidential office. He gets such pressure. Klein Dietz, the corrupt attorney general under Nixon, who's there at the start of the organization, leans on Bell and tells him to drop it. His brother, the U.S. attorney's brother, who's a Republican senator helped into office by Agnew and Nixon, leans on him, tells him to drop the prosecution. George H.W. Bush, running the Republican Party at the time, leans on him, tells him to drop the prosecution. The White House leans on him, tells him to drop it. And he just stands up to it and does what's right, never even lets his line prosecutors know about the pressure he's getting. That is extraordinary civic heroism. And George Bell should be famous for it. I mean, he's passed now, but I think his story can strengthen our own spines now to do the right thing, because Bill Barr is as much of the story of the Trump era in terms of what went wrong in this country as Donald Trump is.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.